Hi everyone, thank you for being the morning champions, it's always appreciated. So I'm Diana Paredes, like we were saying, this is Craig Donaldson, he's the CEO of Metro Bank. I would say by far one of the most successful, if not the most successful challenger bank that's been around for the past few years. I don't know, Craig, if you want to say a few words about yourself as well and what you guys have been doing at Metro?
Good morning everybody, thank you for turning up at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, day 2 in the Big Brother house. My name's Craig Donaldson. I'm the CEO of Metro Bank. I've been there for 9.5 years. Well, it was 4 of us when we started. We've raised now 1.3 billion of equity after our first raise of 15 million. We have 1.3 million customers, 16 billion in assets. We listed a couple of years ago and now have a market cap of about 3 billion on a FTSE 150 company. But it all started with 4 of us. And 15 million pounds that we went out and raised, and we built from there. So I guess I've got experience of getting some of it right, a lot of it wrong, as we built literally from the blank bit of paper.
That's super, thank you. And thank you so much for coming. It's really a pleasure to do this with you. So we've known Craig for a few years now. You're saying it's 4 years. Been part of how we have grown as well. And since the beginning of our company, we've been working with Metro Bank. And so what we're going to try to do for you guys is run you through the journey of how we went from a small company as well, growing a small bank, growing into a huge success. And Craig has a lot of experience in that. So I guess one of the first questions is that when you think about RegTech and when we came to see you guys, so what were you thinking when we arrived and we were 2 people with a laptop telling you, this is going to be the next big thing, can we help you guys?
I've heard that pitch before. It's a pitch I've given many times myself, just not in RegTech. To be honest, for us it's very simple. We've built a business, I've got my architects when we grew to 8 people, we had a technical architect. So we've done it, and we understand when we're talking to people who know what they're talking about. And therefore, what you're looking for is people who are genuinely credible in their field, genuinely know what they're talking about. And if you believe in them and you have the need, you want to work with them. And so for us now, we're integrated with 15 FinTech companies, RegTech FinTech companies, forgive me. And to me, it's about finding people who can do things better than you can, and then working together to get it done. And therefore, for us, it didn't scare us who came in. As long as we could get the right due diligence done and we could work together to do that, we're not scared by that. We're excited by the opportunities rather than scared by the limitations.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess one of the questions for you guys, because we work with a lot of banks, and what we have noticed with Metro Bank is that obviously technology is something you really put at the forefront. So when you think about the whole, regulatory compliance and the burden that, it is right now into banks, how do you think that tech plays into that conversation? Why is RegTech, I guess, important to deal with regulation overall?
For me, RegTech, FinTech is really important no matter what, because it allows you to do things otherwise you couldn't. We've taken a process that took us all day down to a matter of minutes by introducing your technology. That frees up several people to be able to do other things that add more value than crunching what your guys do in minutes. Yeah. So we know it's worth doing. Also, it allows us to do things. So we were the first company, we believe, in the world to produce contactless chip and PIN cards in store. So instantly we can fulfill a permanent debit and credit card, done. And people said, you can't do it because of this, you can't do it. But the bottom line is you find ways through because you know technology will enable you to focus on the important things if you get it right. Yeah. So we know that in 89% of cases, customers walk out with everything done end to end, straight away. We do the KYC, we can do the KYB, we print the cards, the checkbooks, download the mobile app, do everything, real time. Because we've leveraged technology, real-time technology, to do things that other banks just can't. Yeah. If you leverage technology, you can give a better service, you can do it at a better price, you can do it faster. But you've got to be willing to do it. And you've got to be willing to make the step. And that's why we worked with your good self, and that's how we see it. That's why it's important. Because, if you download the top 10 things people hate about their banks, and Google's very good for this, it's there. Yeah. Use technology to engineer it out. And as part of that engineering it out, you've got to have RegTech. Because things like know your customer, things like being able to do the right reporting, get the right data structures, needs the right technology structured in the right way.
And when you think about the regulation, a lot of what it's taking us towards is also transparency, right? And so when you think about transparency and being able to understand how your customer works, I guess, what are the things that you guys are doing at Metro Bank to understand your customer better? And transparency for the customer overall, in data portability, GDPR, all of that conversation.
We're very fortunate. 9 years ago we started the company. We opened our doors on the 29th of July 2010. So we've been trading 8 years in about 7, 8 weeks' time. So we've managed to get our data structure and our data lineage right from day one, and that's been very, very important to us. And to me, it's about the leveraging of data appropriately. So we hold all of our data, but we made a very conscious decision not to market to people. Because we wanted to create fans, we call it. We didn't want to focus on product push. People are cleverer, people know, and people are sick of being hit with things that they don't care about. So to me, it was about how could you structure a service that the customer knew was all about them and leverage technology for them, not for others. And again, for me, you know, GDPR actually helps in that. I've been over the moon with how many emails I've received asking me if people can continue to send me information, and it's no, 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 no. This is great. My emails have about halved, which I don't know what it says about me, but there you go. But this is a good thing if taken properly. If we can leverage compliance and reg management and operational risk management in an appropriate way, it should add value. But we need to create frameworks and stop the scaremongering. And we need more open conversation. And I think that if we can get, I think Mike said it earlier, if we can get the right people in a room having the right conversations, the right things happen. And I think too often, regulation is used as a thing to stop things, where actually it should be used to make them better. And it's too easy to say no, rather than finding a way to work through to get the right answer and get a yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always say to our clients as well that the minimum your RegTech should do is deal with regulation. So there's so much more potential to do much more with it overall. And so, as a CEO of the most successful challenger bank from our perspective, I guess, what do you think? I mean, is regulation still something that keeps you up at night? Is it 2008 news, or is it still very pertinent in 2018 to have this conversation?
I think it's going to be pertinent forever. You know, being heckled now. Don't worry, good sir. Look, regulation's here to stay, and we have to adapt it. We have to influence it as well. But, you know, things like, it's not just RegTech from a technology delivery and ease perspective, you know, working with your good selves and others, making sure the right infrastructure's there. We are going to have, I think it was Mike again said, the 150 questions. But how can we consolidate and get things consistent so that we can come up with frameworks where people can know the questions they're going to be asked and only have to answer it once? Whether you're working with a Metro Bank or a insert banks other names, why does every bank have a different list at the moment? It's because we don't have a consistency. And you know, today I bet we've got regulators in here, I bet we've got banks in here, we've got RegTech. If we all sat in a room and brought out what we think we need to do and agreed a framework and then socialised that framework, couldn't we make it easier for everybody? But I don't see that happening. And we've got to break this because there's too many people asking the same questions in slightly different ways of the same people and blocking, you know, I know we did it to you. Show us your business resumption plan, show us your disaster recovery, show us your, because we believe we have to answer that. But if we had a consistent approach with the other banks you talk to, it would make your life easier.
Of course.
It would make my life easier, and it would make the regulator's life easier, surely. So we need to leverage how we work together and share data in a non-competitive environment that actually lets you develop your product and me serve my customers, and the regulator be comfortable. So I think regulation is here to stay. What has to get better is how we interact with each other, how we share information and create consistency. Because you'd prefer that than 150 questions changing by 50 every week.
Of course. And I guess one of the things with regulation in particular is that compared to a lot of other things that you do as a bank, it's something that can be shared, right? It is a utility opportunity in many ways. And so when you think about that and the regulators as well, like, what do you think is their responsibility overall around dealing with, I guess, promoting more RegTech or bringing more technology or maybe more guidance in general to the industry?
That's a great question. Responsibility, to be honest, I don't know who's got responsibility, because the regulator has a responsibility to make sure that markets behave in the right way, have the right infrastructure in place, but you have a responsibility because you want to build your business. And so we all have a shared responsibility, and I guess it's the Venn diagram of how they all overlap as to what we're trying to achieve. To me, the big responsibility now is working together. You know, we have to break down the barriers of us sort of saying, oh, you're a RegTech, we're a bank, And I'm sure this, you know, I've worked in big banks. I'm sure it's where we go, we can't work with them because they won't do this. We've got to start to break down, you know, have the scales fall from the eyes.
Yeah.
And we've got to just get, I guess I'm back to that consistency. What do we want to see? And can we make RegTech aware? And can we be then honest and open about it and not try and go beyond it? And can we get the regulators into the tent so that they can agree, yes, if we can fulfill this framework, we're all happy.
Yeah.
But then for people setting up RegTech, they can see what's coming. You know, I think it must be very hard. I know I found it hard when you go, well, what are the next questions? When we asked for the application forms to set the bank up, they couldn't give them to us because we were de novo. And there hadn't been a de novo in the UK for over 100 years. So we didn't know what to expect next.
Yeah.
And I think if we can create frameworks and feedback loops where it's consistent, you'll know what to expect, we'll know what to ask, and the regulator should be comfortable if we get through that process.
Yeah.
And it should liberate innovation. So we need to work together.
I mean, the thing that's interesting when you speak about RegTech in general, right, and new companies and new technologies, that obviously there's a lot of things around open banking, APIs, open architecture, and you were mentioning before you've been working with, you know, another few FinTechs like ourselves. And so how do you guys leverage, I guess, on the new banking approach and then on the new technologies as well, and that interoperability that's possible thanks to better tech?
So to be honest, we know there's people out there who can innovate far better than we can, and therefore we want to engage with it. We also know that we have to make sure that we can satisfy our stakeholders and ourselves. And for stakeholders, I mean my shareholders, my board, my regulators, myself. And because of the questions we faced when we were small, and because of, to be truthful, the battles we had. You know, I remember when we were applying for our application, we were told we couldn't get our application and get the license to trade until we could prove that we could send and receive payments. So we went to the Payments Council and said, can we join? Yeah. And they said, no, you can't join until you've got a banking license. So we went back to the regulator and said, we can't send a payment or receive a payment until we've got a banking license. And they said, well, we can't let you have a license until you can send and receive. And we lost 3 months in a Kafkaesque catch-22 situation. And then we worked out how to get around it. And that's how organizations are authorized now.
Yeah.
Why did we do that? Necessity. We were burning a lot of money for 3 months going nowhere. And therefore, because we've been through a lot of these processes, when we come across people like your good self or the other 14 companies we work with, we're willing to try. We've been through a lot of it, so we've possibly got a little bit more experience of dealing with it than some of the larger companies. And we apply our ways of working and our understanding, and also the questions that we found value added, and ignore the questions we found to not add any value, to try and take it forward in the right way. So we find it's brilliant working with people who are innovative. They can do far more than we can. And I mean in RegTech and FinTech, you know. And we kind of know the questions we need to ask because we went through it. Yeah. We've been through it. So, you know, we know around the data management that a lot of it's bog standard, but things like the cloud scares a lot of organizations, and it shouldn't. Yeah. It's about data management, knowing how to structure the data, who's managing the data, what's the disaster recovery, et cetera, et cetera. We've been very fortunate building the bank from nothing to go through that. But why aren't people learning from what we've been through? You know, because we've worked together well. We work with others as well. And I mean, how many banks do you have now?
Almost 50.
50, which is amazing. And how many did you have when we started talking?
0.
0.
One of our first clients, definitely a hero.
But my point is, therefore, that shouldn't, because we could be one of the first,
yeah.
because we probably knew the questions to ask,
yeah.
and then you could move through faster with others. We've got to create frameworks.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that was quite interesting for us is that when we started working with you, you were very careful, obviously, in your due diligence and in the procurement process. But so how do you balance out that, right? Because obviously regulation in particular is something that requires you to be very careful working with new technologies and new companies. So how do you balance that risk versus the opportunities and the right procurement, I guess, that you have to go into?
We're very clear with what we want to find out, and it's around data management, data integrity, data security, and therefore you know what you want to get answered. And if you can't get the right answers, you go back and come up with suggestions.
Yeah.
And then you negotiate. And I'm afraid you've got to know your walk-away position. And you know, we have walked away from companies who can't get us comfortable. And interestingly, they've never been able to not get us comfortable, or let me change that to they've always been able to get us comfortable with how good their technology is. What they haven't been able to get us comfortable with is their data management, data security, disaster recovery, you know, what I'd call the mature side of the business. The innovation side is spectacular, but they've focused so much on the product, they haven't rounded it out.
Yeah.
And to me, it's about knowing how much rounding out do we want and trying to get to those conversations early. So I think it's being clear what you want, being clear where you've got to walk away from, and then trying to find ways to make it work. And I guess because we're still a small company with 3,500 people, we're more willing to try and work it through fast. You can get the decision makers in a room and have a proper bloody discussion, rather than having people who come into a room. I mean, I hate going into the room and you go, who are the decision makers? And they go, oh no, I'm writing the report to give to my boss who's going to send it to that, and then we'll go and present to them. Well, get out the meeting. Yeah. If you don't have a decision maker in the room, don't have a meeting. Yeah. So we've become clear on things like that.
But so that was exactly how we started with you guys. We could actually get everyone in one room and make a quick decision, which was good. And what was also interesting is that I heard at Metro Bank, 2 people have to say no before something is actually stopped. Yeah. And so when you think about, you know, senior managers regime, a lot of the regulation as well is requiring more and more responsibility from the people inside the organization to do the right things, to put regulation at the top and compliance at the top. So how do you influence culture? How did you get that culture to be so entrepreneurial, but then also diligent enough to run a successful challenger bank?
It's culture. So we have a culture about creating fans, and we also have started a business from scratch with not a lot of money and tried to build something we believe in. So we want to work with people who can help us make it better. But what we've done over a period of time is created the frameworks that allow us to make faster decisions. Because it's very easy actually to give a no and check that it should be a no with somebody else. And you go through fast stage gates to make a yes. Yeah. So my view is that what you want quick no's. And it might take a little bit longer to get a yes, because what you want to do is you want to know it's worth going to the next level of detail to keep going yes, 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 yes. So it's all about frameworks. It's all about being very clear about what you want and what you have to have, and then being open about it. Yeah. And, you know, we've got it wrong. We've developed it over time. We've developed it with you. I mean, when we were working with you 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, it's been progressing and developing over time. And I think that it has to, if we're going to keep getting it more right. Yeah. So to me, though, the reason why I feel comfortable under SMR is because I know we've got frameworks with people in there, and it'll go through different levels of agreement and fast decision making. Yeah. And I've got people then, because they've been involved in the decision, who stand by it. That I don't find that I've got a lot of orphan decisions in the business, where it went to a committee after being through 20 different hands with everybody saying not a lot. You know, people have to say a yes or they have to say a no. Yeah. If they say a yes, they've got to justify it. If they say a no, they've got to persuade somebody else it should be a no. Yeah. And to me, it's about accountability. SMR is about taking accountability. And if you can force it further down the organization, you win.
So leveraging, I guess, on good technology to help you with the frameworks, and also culturally changing as well the way that people are thinking and doing things inside the organization.
I hate when people bring me a pack and you sit around a table and, you know, anything more than about 10 pages I struggle with personally these days. So, and somebody goes, well, what about this? And you go, will that change the decision? Is it important? Too many people ask minutiae questions to show they're clever. And actually, to me, they're just showing they're not very clever. Yep. And what we need is people who know their stuff, who can work with great people, and who believe in the technology. You know, the reason we could work with you is because our architects believed in your technology, believed in your company, and believed what you could do. Yep. Therefore, you had people who wanted to make it happen. Yeah. They could see the benefits. I do worry in other organizations, if you don't get to the decision makers, the people who are doing the work are disconnected from the decision. Yeah, and they're not empowered. And they're not empowered. And you've got to empower people to be the decision makers, because if it doesn't come through with the yeses all the way, it's going to be dead, or it should be killed. It shouldn't have got all the yeses. Yeah. I mean, we'll have a couple of minutes at the end to also ask questions. So if you guys are using Slido.com and you want to send a question across to Craig, we'll also do that at the end of our session.
I mean, one of the things as well that we were discussing in the cloud, so recently we moved your system from on-premise to the cloud. And so going back to, what we get as guidance from the regulation and all of that, I think this is a very good example of what we could have done with more guidance. So how did you guys decide, and where do you see the cloud, I guess, in the next few years as part of the technology that can be helping your company?
So the cloud is great for the right things. The way we managed it with yourselves we were worried, obviously, about how we managed our service.
Yeah.
And you were going to manage the data in part of the cloud, but we didn't have this, we needed the see-through. And so the way we got around that after many, many conversations was that we took the data into the cloud and then you manage it for us. Yeah. So we've got the relationship with the cloud provider. It was a really simple way forward.
Yeah.
It was obvious. But it took us 2-3 months to get there.
The legals are always the most complicated part.
And it's embarrassing and expensive. So for me, it's about, why didn't we know that before?
Yeah.
And now it was funny, I was talking with Mike this morning. There are, other organisations that have done that. And if we'd spoken to them earlier, we now know how to manage it better because of what we've just been through.
Yeah.
So next time we're contracting with you on more work, we know how to get around it. But also, because it was the first time we did it with a company like yourself, we now will follow that approach when we're doing it with other people.
Yeah.
Making it easier, because we've got a way that we're comfortable with the cloud. I do worry about concentration.
Yeah.
We run a private cloud and we are in the public clouds in certain places, but the private cloud outsourced into a private environment. And I do worry about concentration risk. For large organisations and small organisations, if there's only 3 or 4 big cloud providers, if one of them was to go down, who knows what goes down?
That's right.
So the ability to move data, to manage data, and to have the instant backups into private and public, I think is very important. But again, because we've worked all of that through, we now have a template, we have a framework on which we can go forward, that we're comfortable with, our regulators are comfortable with, you're comfortable with, and we'll replicate that.
Yeah.
My challenge would be to Money 2020, if I may, why don't you get people together and make the conversations happen?
Yeah.
You know, you've got everybody probably in this room who could come up with a great way forward. And rather than us talking, if we sat down, we'd solve it faster. And that would help people like us move forward faster, so we could invest in more innovation.
No, definitely. And I guess, so for your culture at Metro Bank, I know that you guys really embrace learning fast, failing fast and cheap.
Yeah, I'm a northerner from the UK.
And so I guess the question is, for example, how important do you think that has been to the success of Metro Bank, the learning fast
You've got to learn fast. You know, I used to work many, many years ago. I keep it quiet, but I was a technologist. My degree was technology. And I worked in research and development for BT at a place called Martlesham Heath. And there you could see, when I was working on innovation, you had a 3 to 5 year innovation curve. You knew if you came out with a new technology offering, you had 3 to 5 years to leverage it and to make money out of it. You're probably down to 3 to 6 months now. So if you're taking too much time to learn and to get stuff in, you're missing the curves.
Yeah.
And you're launching into things that have already been done. So you've got to be willing to make quick decisions, get in quick, and if it's not working, get out and get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And also for me, exclusivities are a thing of the past, because you spend more time negotiating exclusivities than you do building the tech.
Yeah.
And anything that's launched, if it's really, really good, I can copy it. I have a tech stack, you know, that allows me to do things that, you know, the neo-banks can do. Probably the big banks can't, in truth, but the neo-banks can.
Yeah.
You copy it. So you need to get things really condensed and move quick. Otherwise, you miss the innovation curves that are going on. And also, you need to accept you're going to miss some. And because as soon as you're launched, it's legacy.
Yeah.
So you need to be getting to the right curves and choosing which ones to go on. But fail fast and move forward faster is something you have to work on.
No, completely. And I guess we have, so the next session that's coming up is going to be Nick from the FCA. And so if you had any kind of, you know, call for action from the regulator's perspective, so the learning fast and failing fast might be a bit more difficult for them to do. What would be your one request that you could give?
I don't think learning fast and failing fast is difficult as long as you've done it with the right understanding of customer or the impacts of it. And as long as you've managed it in an appropriate way with the right frameworks again, it's fine. You know, it shouldn't be damaging. Yeah. It's about going into it with your eyes open and knowing your back-out plan when it doesn't work. And, you know, knowing your options when you've made a decision are really important before you start. You know, we don't let anything launch unless we know if it fails, how it fails, and how we back away from it. You can't launch something unless you know the sort of decision trees at the end.
Yeah.
You just shouldn't do it. So that's important. And to me, what I would say is, to be honest, with the sandbox approach, we're seeing a lot more of it. But how could we get together more to come up with frameworks that we can all work to?
Yeah.
Because the more that we can debunk ideas that slow everybody down, the more we can liberate and innovate.
So collaboration with the regulators
all
as well,
about collaboration.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
So we're getting quite a few questions, so I'll take a couple here. So you just mentioned sandboxes, so we'll pass that one. So I'm going to take actually the second one from Johnny Rose, because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you as well. So from the journey that you've had with Metro Bank, what would you do differently if you were back on your day one?
It's not about technology, it's about people. I would hire and fire much more aggressively. Culture is the key, and once or twice I've recruited people where they haven't fitted the culture as well as they should have, and what I've then done is let it go on too long.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a small organisation, you don't have time to carry victims or terrorists, and you need to get them out. And the way I put it is, we only recruit great people, but great people sometimes don't enjoy our culture. We should get them out. They're still great people, they just don't fit us, and I wish I'd been more, I wish I'd acted faster.
And then do you see legacy UK banks or the likes of Monzo or Revolut as your biggest competitive threats? So if you look at the market, and obviously you guys have inspired a lot of new banks to come in, so who would you say are your competition? The old school ones or the new ones?
Do you know, I don't think of it like that because I don't think customers do anymore. You know, when I look at, say, apps, I don't look at banking apps. I look at apps that are out there, the best apps that are available that you want to learn from. So, you know, I love what I did for a period of time. They've just taken a bit of a bang, what Lush have done on the high street. I love the John Lewis approach to partnerships. So I don't look at banks as competition because I think that the way life is going, people don't judge you against other banks, they judge you against the things they're used to interacting with.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you're into sport, sport is competing now with computer games to get kids engaged. It's not competing with another sport. And so I think that I like to look at the different parts of things and try and compete against the best at whatever part and see what we can learn from them. So, you know, I've been very fortunate to spend time with a lot of companies who've let me learn from them. For me, though, we do something that no other banks do. We think about how to fulfill a point of sale. It's all about real-time fulfillment. How can we take data and give what the customer wants, whichever channel they enter through?
Yeah.
Which is why we can do things in the store that no other bank can do. Which is why we came up first in the UK with block and unblock your cards on the mobile app. Now, the big banks can't do that because they're batch processing. The new neo-banks can, but we were the first.
Yeah.
4 years ago.
So, I mean, last words, after all of these successes, what is next for Metro Bank?
Continue to create fans, continue to focus on customers and learn how we can do our job better.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us.